You walk in tired and hungry, one bad dinner away from losing it. You don't like to cook. You don't want more takeout. You just want something good. That's why there's Dish by Blue Apron. Pre-made meals with at least 20 grams of protein and no artificial flavors or colors. From fridge to fork in 5 minutes or less. Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello everyone and welcome to Howie the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for a lovely little podcast today as we're about to talk about things which are really positive and Sunderland are signing players, not just any old players, but players who come with world-class reputations. And had you told me when I was walking out of Wembley that I'd be opening Twitter on my phone and seeing a video of Granit Xhaka saying how we're the lads, I probably would have told you to piss off and you're mental. So the fact that that's even a thing gives me great joy, and I'm here to chat about it with Andrew and Chris, who are like me and just can't really get over the fact that this is happening. But there's also some other transfer news to talk about. It looks like we're in the market for a goalkeeper who's about to get over the line, and of course, we are still looking to find that elusive wide man who can give us a few more tricks and flicks from the wing. So we're going to chat about that too. First up, Andrew's with us, like I said. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. Nice to catch up again. And like you say, some exciting news coming out this morning.
Yes. Lots going on in the world of Sunderland. And, I never get sick of talking about them, as I tell you all the time. And, I can't wait to get my teeth into this one with you two. It is really exciting stuff. And also with us, I said, is Chris, who, like me, had a heavy weekend. And we both sound like Barry White. So, as Andrew kind of said off air, for the female listeners, I don't know whether this is doing too much for you, but we sound a little bit ropey, mate. And you're always, your voice, you've got a lovely deep voice. Mine just sounds like this when I've had a heavy weekend / cold. So, I'm not sure what we're whether we're both going to be able to get through this without coughing and spluttering, but I'm going to try my best. How are you, mate?
I don't know how to answer that question, so I'll move on. But I think when it comes to the females, I think they're probably already switched off, if I'm completely honest. But yeah, in terms of the lads, just when we thought it all went quiet, it's all kicked off again, hasn't it? Because we had this period of we burst into the transfer window, and there was all this activity, and then it was interesting actually because Keith Downey called it, didn't he? He said basically Llorente was kind of the first one that it got to a certain point and then fell through. Otherwise, we'd captured everyone we got, and we had this quiet period, and then bang, right back into it again.
Yeah, we're paying the money, we're getting the deals over the line, we're acting professionally, we're sending luxury jets to pick up big names. I mean, it's just nice, isn't it, Andrew? I just love it.
Yeah,
I just love it. I can't wait for the proper football to start, of course. But this has been for a Sunderland fan, this has been such a good summer, and this signing of Granit Xhaka really underlines just how much we've stepped it up.
It does, and when you just look at the people who are reporting on this type of transfer, we are back in the big time. Like you say, we're sending fancy private jets here, there, and everywhere to pick these players up. We're obviously impressing them with our negotiations and telling them about how we want the club to go forward. And then instead of just being like a couple of lines at the end of a report, we're now like, there's exclusive videos of players landing in the country on Sky Sports News, and, David Ornstein and Fabrizio Romano, all of these big figures are talking about Sunderland. And you're right, it's been a great summer. It's brilliant to see. And long may it continue. Hopefully there's a few more in the next few days coming over.
Yeah. Well, there was no secret made about the Xhaka signing, Chris. But even when Keith Downey was on the airstrip filming him get off a private jet, I still couldn't quite believe it was happening. I'm like, this sounds too good to be true. This is going to go tits up at some point. And then that photo got leaked, which, that was bad crack by whoever did it, and I'm sure they've been reprimanded for it. Because they got to spoil the big moment, seeing him in the red and white shirt. But as soon as that photo appeared online, everybody was absolutely buzzing. And that was the point where I was like, actually, this is happening. And even still, since then, Chris, I've just been questioning myself, saying, how have we done this? Like, we're not signing Granit Xhaka, who was in his prime maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We're still signing one of the best midfielders in Europe. He finished 16th in last year's Ballon d'Or. That's how good he is. He is still a quality player. And the fact that Sunderland, who finished 4th in the Championship last season, are signing a player with that repute should be putting everybody on notice, not just Sunderland fans, is to say we're very, very serious. We're not just coming to make up the numbers in the Prem. And I mean, if anybody else had signed him, you'd be jealous, wouldn't you? So, yeah, still struggling to get my head around it.
Yes. Well, overall, I mean, we've talked to quite a few journalists recently. You've talked to a few. I've talked to one or two, and all of them are talking about raising eyebrows across the football world. Keith Downey even said, the speed and the skill that we've worked at has surprised him. He was, I think, from the words he was getting out of the club, he was almost expecting us to go in with a very similar squad and like almost doing I think he described it as a Luton or can't remember what the other one was, probably an Ipswich, where we're probably just adding a few players and trying to stay up with the squad we've got and then going again and keeping, and then bagging that money and seeing if we can build that way. Don't think anybody expected us to go this way. And again, the timescales with this is interesting because, it goes back to I think it was first reported, certainly Keith Downey first reported it around the 16th of July. So you're talking a fortnight ago, essentially. And then, by the way, he said, talking about that private jet, he described it as about the inside of that private jet. He's seen some pictures of that. He said it was just incredible. I think it was actually Kirill Louis-Dreyfus. I think it was his private jet, wasn't it?
He said something along the lines of, he just went, I don't care what it costs, I'll pay the money.
Well, yeah.
Luxury jets. And like we acted big time. We went there and we got the deal done because it was there to be done.
Well, this is the thing with talking about that time scale and how it went along. And the first link where I think we just basically said, we'll give you 10 million for him, 32-year-old, whatever. And yeah, like he described, it's incredible that we're not, because how many times, I mean, God, you go back to the famous one, which is the Umvillia one, where it's you're pushing it up by, we'll give you 3.2, we'll give you 3.4, 3.5, 3.55. It's like we're bidding like that until they say yes. He just said, what do you want? And I think they're probably surprised by Leverkusen because I doubt many clubs act like that, especially ones who've just gone up to the top flight in their country. So he just said, there's a check. What do you want from him? I'm probably not expecting them to say yes. He went, yep, sorted. We'll have him. Thank you. It's a bizarre conversation. I doubt it goes on in football all that much. And talking about his age and everything, again, just talking to journalists generally, that when they're shocked that we're doing this, but 32-year-old. But I'd argue actually that potentially he's a better player now than he was when he left Arsenal. I think he's actually calmed down a bit. He's matured, I think, into a better player. I remember talking to Arsenal fans at the time, and they were like, "Yeah, his disciplinary record." I think he had a really bad relationship with the Arsenal fans at one point. Had a few sendings off, and I think at Bayer Leverkusen, and I think a lot of that might be the influence of Alonso, and I think he's learned a lot under him. And I just think it's unbelievable that we've talked him into coming to this, for this project. I mean, we're talking about staying up. We're as Sunderland fans focusing on staying up. He'll be looking at it saying, I've got all these young players. I've got the Diarras, the Siddiquis, I've got the Talbi, I've got Adingra wide, just doing all the running, all the sprinting. I can just sit in front of the back four, do my thing, and, play his game and play as he wants. And, there's been talk of him moving into coaching roles and things like this. But, if we say, look, and, if we rate him that highly, the way we work, come into the coaching staff, and we don't have a system where we get a management team and then that management team leaves the whole lot and we spend 10 million on getting a new management team in. So if he comes through and does, gets all these coaches, let's say he might even be doing them now. He might be, people might be looking at him as a highly rated coach for the future now. Get him in the club, and it's not just an investment for the next 2 years. Could be for the next 10 years if he becomes a brilliant coach and stays with the club. So it's just this forward planning. And I just think it blows our mind because we've never seen this at Sunderland before.
No, that's right. And you've got to think, Andrew, and Chris kind of touched on it there, you've got to think we must have put a really appealing package together on this. And yes, money is a thing. We will be paying Granit Xhaka a lot of money. I've got no doubt about that. But it won't just be money. There must be other things. I mean, it's been reported, I think it was by Blick, which is a Swiss newspaper, I think. Might be wrong. Someone can correct us if I'm wrong on that. But they've reported some of the finer details, and they said that it was a 20 million euro package to make the deal with Leverkusen. But also on top of that, he would be paid £75,000 per week. And this is a crucial detail, he's been promised the captaincy of the team, which when we did the pod last week, we're talking about Dan Neil and his future and what it could all mean for him going forward. You've got to think that these are important things to Granit Xhaka. If you're going to come to a young club like Sunderland or coming up from the Championship, you're expecting him to set the standards. And the way he does that is he leads us out on a Saturday with the captain's armband on. And like I've said, we've talked a lot about Dan Neil, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come off the back of this based on what we're reading. But captaincy, potential coaching roles, it's a really, you've got to think a 32-year-old, it's a very appealing package. 3-year deal as well, let's not forget. And look, he was very comfortable where he was, I'm sure. Leverkusen going through a bit of change at the minute, new manager, players leaving, things like that, but still one of the big boys in Germany. He could have quite easily stopped there, carried on, maybe even achieved something with them, got more Champions League football, won cups, so it's still quite appealing. And then there would have been other clubs interested in him too. But this package Sunderland have put together, it does make you think like it's about more than just right now. It's about what he can do in the future with the club.
Yeah, and credit to the club for presumably presenting that package in an impressive way. In the past, as has been touched upon, I think you got the feeling that when we were doing deals, we were just saying, he's an extra $5,000 a week, he's an extra $10,000 a week or whatever. And that doesn't necessarily then bring in players who are hungry to put on the shirt and be part of the club going forward. I like to think that we have said, yeah, there's a role for you here, not just as a player, but as some sort of kind of a figure point for the group. There's a lot of young players there. And if he's the type of person who can see himself helping other kids come through, because he will have been at that point at some time in his career, he will have been a young player looking up to more senior professionals. Obviously, it does appeal to his character. And yeah, whether it's as a formal coaching position down the line or whether it's just an informal thing around the club, you look at somebody like Chris Rigg, for example. You are a teenage lad. You are about to have your first season in the Premier League. And now you're going to be working alongside Granit Xhaka. You must just be thinking, this is brilliant. This has given me the opportunity to become the best player I can. If I can look at how he does things, maybe get a couple of bits of advice off him and by being close to him, see firsthand what it is he does. Now, I know there's slightly different positions they play in, but if you're a young player at Sunderland and Granit Xhaka's turning up at your training ground, he's sitting next to you in the changing rooms, you're going to be thrilled. And yeah, this move doesn't just improve our starting 11. I think it's got longer term benefits to us as well.
Yeah, and I've been impressed by some. Obviously, they're going to say all the right things, Chris, right? But just seeing Granit Xhaka say "we" a lot in that opening interview with the club. We are back to where this club needs to be. We want to stay here, and we want to write our own history. He's already saying the right things for me, and I know players do that when they sign. But come on, I mean, I'm still pinching myself, honest. I'm looking at, right now as I talk to you, I'm looking at a photo of him in a Sunderland shirt, and I'm still like, nah, is that AI? Is that a Photoshop? I just can't get my head around this signing at all. But he's saying the right things, and I thought, what Christian Speakman said was pretty cool as well. He said, "We're delighted to welcome Granit and his family to Sunderland. His arrival is a significant endorsement of our ambition and our desire to build a team our supporters can be proud of in the Premier League. talking about his accomplishments, about what he is, and just looking forward to getting him involved and stuff. But I think that's really important that with all of these signing announcements, Speakman won't outright say we aren't just coming to the Premier League to make up the numbers. We are coming to stay here. But he's pretty much saying that, isn't he? He's pretty much saying like we are being ambitious here. We're bringing in people who are going to genuinely make a difference at the top level. And nobody's under any illusions here. Sunderland just going to waltz into the Premier League and finish in the top 10. That is almost impossible to do in your first season after promotion. But what he's saying is that like collectively as a football club, we are trying to make ourselves ready for everything, whereas there are other clubs at this level. Burnley are going to be expecting to struggle. Leeds will too, although they've had a decent summer as well. We'll be seeing the likes of Brentford, who are going to be down there, I think, given the summer they've had. Wolves will probably be in and around it. West Ham, maybe. There might be one or two other surprises. It's saying to them clubs, like, oh, Evan, what you got? Isn't it? We're almost speaking to the clubs above the ones we've just been promoted with. We're saying to the others, say, we're coming for you. You've got to watch out for Sunderland coming in. And I think there'll be a lot of people in the Premier League now looking at Sunderland signing Granit Xhaka and be like, shit, that's a big signing for them. We wouldn't have minded him.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, a lot of European clubs, I think, bloody hell, I didn't even know he's available because it was probably, I think it was one of them where, it's not one of them where a name gets touted around Europe to some clubs. I think we identified him and went out, and Kirill Louis-Dreyfus personally did his thing and they talked to him about the project. Because again, I mean, you touched on it there, some of the things he said, very proud to be here, excited. I felt the energy and the mentality that all the people and players have. It's exactly what I wanted. I have a very good feeling. As you said, we are back to where this club needs to be. And we want to stay here and write our own history. And he's talking about us having quality as well as kind of the young players and all of that. So again, he's saying the right things, but these things come from somewhere. And, that type of thing. And he was saying it's been a long time to wait. So I think he's been looking forward to it for a couple of weeks, getting it over the line. And talking about what we're doing, I mean, the best example I can think of is going back to, well, I suppose you can look at the Mick McCarthy one when we got promoted there, but also the last season at Roker Park, where if you do end up going down, what you don't want to feel is you didn't give it a go. You didn't really you didn't try and stay up. You kind of, you look at Ipswich a little bit and you think, and Keith Downey again talked about it a little bit on all these clubs coming up, and they come up with the idea of planning for the season after in the Championship. Now, us doing what we're doing, it just doesn't feel like that. It feels like even if we do go down, even if the worst happens this season, we'll all say at the end of the season, we had a go. We tried, we at least tried our best, and we had a plan that tried to leapfrog us above some of those clubs who we consider to be in those bottom half. And you went through some of them, Gav, who were having a shocking summer. And talking about that Premier League as well, I think it's a very different Premier League to the ones I was talking to a couple of Ipswich fans at the weekend. We were talking about the Premier League of the last couple of seasons, where they said that the likes of the Crystal Palaces of the world went to Portman Road and absolutely blew them away with pace and power. And they were shocked that these teams in the bottom half of the Premier League was such a level above. It really shocked them. I mean, Ipswich have been away for quite a few years. They were Championship for 15 years or whatever. So it's been a long time since they've seen Premier League football. And they just went, wow. I mean, this is just a level above that. Even the Brentfords, the Bournemouths, all of that they were such a high level. And we've got to try and leapfrog that. We've got to leapfrog the stage of being, because again, you've got to look back at how we got promoted. Now, in the euphoria of what happened in the semi-final and the final, you've got to remember that we scraped through, and there was many weeks in that Championship season where we were poor and we had to really dig out results. And we did it really well, don't get me wrong, in terms of we had to dig in and we had to be strong, because there was teams who went through periods of games who were on top of us, and we had to defend and we had to hold leads. And we didn't blow sides away. We didn't go up on 110 points or whatever. We didn't break records. So we have to come from a position where actually we are a very good championship side, finishing in that top 6, to leapfrogging, being in the bottom 3, to moving probably 5 steps up the ladder. And, you know, and the way they're doing it as well, you talk about strategies. You look at Bellingham for going for 30 odd million. Well, then you look at Siddiqui and Xhaka, that's basically the Bellingham money. So, you know, the way they're doing it in that way, that, yeah, and then, so when you look at that central midfield, okay, Lafay has come in, he was kind of the first one, but in terms of those 3 players who've come in since further in the window, the Siddiqui, Diarra and Xhaka, you could argue that really we've only spent money on Diarra because the Bellingham money's gone straight on that. And you look at, you talked about Dan Neil and the midfield of last season. Well, our midfield of last season was Dan Neil, Joe Bellingham, Chris Rigg. That was our midfield central 3. Now, already within, what is it now? I'm trying to think, 6, maybe, I don't know what it is, 8 weeks or whatever it's been since the playoff final, we've moved on from our championship central midfield. Now, you could argue about Bellingham moving on to bigger and better things, but actually, if we'd signed Lafay, Siddiqui, Diarra, Xhaka, I'd argue that Bellingham might struggle to get into that team if we'd kept him, but we got 30 odd million for him. We got 30 odd million for a player who you could put the argument across that he'd struggle to get into that first 11. Now we've got those players. So we're already moving on, and you can see in terms of that profile of player and quality of player and level of player. And Dan Neil, I mean, but Dan Neil, we had this conversation before. I think Dan Neil should expect the club to move on, and his mindset should be, well, if Sunderland are moving on with these players, that's the level I need to be at. Not I need to move to get first team football. It's like, right, well, I'm in the mix. I'm in the mix with these players, and I'm this type of player, but improve, you know, better yourself. Yeah. And I'm sure he will, because, you know, he's a professional footballer, the first year in the Premier League. He'll want to do that. He won't want to just go, well, I give up. These are better than me. He's not, no way he's going to do that. He's going to stick around. He's going to fight for his place. And there's going to be the type of games where Dan Neil is needed. Put a foot on the ball, play it easy. And we're going to need that in front of the back 4. And actually you look at, and he's going to have to learn a different style of play, because I think Labrie is going to be very different. You look at Siddiqui and Diarra especially, they are built to press in the final third. And then you've got Xhaka, and if you look at his stats in the Bundesliga, I think he had, I'm going off the top of my head now, but I'm pretty sure he was, just looking now, he was 5th in the Bundesliga for winning possession in the final third. And all of these players are built to do that. Now, you know, we didn't necessarily do that. We did it at the start of the season in the Championship, but I don't think we did it for a full season. So I think Dan Neil might need to kind of, you know, change his game and maybe progress his game, which is, I think, is obvious at the age he's at.
You're talking there like he's going to stay. Do you think he will? I think this throws it up in the air. He's the captain of the team in the last year of his contract, and we're currently giving the captaincy to somebody else and who's getting a 3-year deal. I honestly think this means he's away. I hope I'm wrong. I'd like him to stay, but you know,
but that will take. I mean, yeah, you might be right. You might be right, but I think if you talked about a big squad and the potential of Diarra and Siddiqui going away to the African Nations Cup, we're going to need a big squad. Now, if you look in the centre, you've got Lafay, Diarra, Siddiqui, Xhaka, Dan Neil. Yes, you've got Chris Rigg, but I suspect in the Premier League, Chris Rigg might play more wide than in the centre, or he might play in that advanced role if Lafay is injured or whatever. But you're going to need a squad. You're going to need a squad game. I said this before, that there's going to be games you want to completely change, and you might see games where the whole central midfield comes off, or 2 of the 3 come off, and we change the way we play by putting a different 2 on. And Lafay might, you talked about Talby. I think Talby's very raw out wide, and Adingra, I think, might be hit and miss. So what you might see Chris Rigg and Lafay wide, and then, you know, Dan Neil come in the centre when those players went in types of games where it's needed. But if he leaves, it means he's made the decision where he's almost given up. Now, does he? It's him kind of backing himself. Does he think he's good enough to be in the mix with these players, or does he just think, well, I want first team football, so I'm just going to go and I'm just going to give up? I'd be really surprised if he just. Well, yeah, there's the money aspect, but it depends what the contract negotiations, how they're going on. But as purely on the football side, I'd be surprised if he left.
I want him to stay, personally, lads. I like Dan Neil. But just touching on something that was said earlier about the side that played in the Championship and the side that played at Wembley, as we were driving away from Wembley talking about going into the Premier League, Dan Neil was one of the few players that me and my mate thought, yeah, he's good enough in the he's going to be good enough in the Premier League. That's not a position we'll need to upgrade on. The fact that the club have done, and to such an extent with the players you've mentioned, just proves that point from earlier on about we're not here to mess about. We're going to give it a good go in terms of the transfer market, but also in terms of the way we play. Those stats about where these players win possession, I don't think we'll go down. I think we've got a chance of a half decent season. But if we do go down, it won't be because we've been meek and we've just sat back. This whole club at the moment is geared to improving on every single aspect.
But I think it's brilliant, though, Andrew, something you just talked about there, for leaving that playoff final. And, okay, the argument went on a long time afterwards in terms of, how much was Sheffield United on top of us, because they didn't particularly create huge amount of chances. But, they were on top. I was worried at half time because we didn't seem to be in the game. Now, that's Sheffield United. Now, if you concede that much possession to a Premier League team, even a Crystal Palace of the world, a Brentford of the world, it's like that's 2 or 3-0 down at half time. Like, you're getting punished for a performance like that in the Premier League. And I think the club absolutely 100% knew our place. They didn't try. The beauty is, I think, they're not trying to kid themselves thinking, these players, these players got in the top 6. We can give it a go with these players. They're thinking we need to really step it up. We need to leapfrog 5 or 6 positions, which actually in monetary terms, in terms of prize money, is probably about 100 million. So if you spend 100 million and come 15th, 14th, 13th, actually you've made your money back almost. That you've kind of gambled and you've said, right, well, we need to buy those players to get us in those positions, to get that prize money, make it back. And basically this is how you start progressing. You look at Brighton with their, top half finishes. And then the whole Dingra thing, they signed him for 8 million 2 or 3 years ago. Then 2 years later, they've made a 12, 15 million profit on it.
That money thing, there's another interesting aspect to how we're shaping up at the moment. I'm getting the impression from what I'm reading, we're able to get deals over the line because we can offer substantially more as a down payment. There's a lot of other clubs who are trying to buy players, but they're only talking about, installments. And that prize money you mentioned there, Chris, it's almost as if some of these purchases are on the never in the hope that by the end of the season they've earned enough to pay later installments. At the moment, we can go to Bayer Leverkusen and say, how much is it you want for Xhaka? Well, here you go. Here's an absolutely huge chunk of it now. Let's get talking. Let's get this deal done. It gives us a head start.
And I completely agree on that. And the other thing, which I've mentioned a couple of times, I think, but is I find that the two of the fascinating signings I think we've made is Siddiqui and Talbi, because I think almost their own admission, and sometimes the club's admission, if you look at some of the wording in terms of when we'd signed them and what like the statements we're making, we spent, let's say those two are around the 40 million mark combined that we've spent on those two. I think the club considers those to be very raw and almost potential. Now we're spending 40 million on players that we consider to be raw and needing to be knocked into shape a little bit, and not automatic choices in the first 11. I mean, it might turn out they might have a brilliant season. I mean, they might turn into a Mayenda where you're just not expecting it, and they're absolutely fantastic all season. But that we've signed these thinking, that they've got every chance to be world beaters, but we're not 100% sure. We're almost taking a chance on them. 40 million. I mean, last season we were over the moon when we signed Wilson Isidore for probably a couple. We were like, whoa, that's a huge sign. And that, we're spending the money now. Now we're spent, it's like a year on, we're spending 40 million on players who we think have got potential. I mean, those two, and this is the thing with those two. This is why I think, the Dan Neils and the Chris Riggs, and all of that will, potentially might play, and you might talk in 15, 20 games, but I think they'll see that as a success because the Siddiquis and the Talbis, they're looked at as potential, and they might be completely hit and miss. I mean, they might be fantastic one week and rough the next and out of the game or finding their feet or needing a few games out. And that's why I think we're going to need a big squad.
It sounds, Chris, from the way you're talking, as if there's a plan. You know what I mean? It all makes sense. None of this is scattergun. There's admissions there that, we're going to sign some players, and some of them might need time to bed in, or some of them might not be at their best for a couple of years. But that will work alongside the players we've already got here. It all suggests that we've sat down and looked at this, identified how we're going to go forward, and going back to Xhaka, he's obviously the one that crosses out that section on the plan that says a bit of experience, a bit of guidance needed. It's been mentioned before. If we do go down, I don't think there would be any feeling of we've just let that happen. But we're trying our best here.
But I thought there was a plan with Howard Wilkinson and Steve Cotterill. So what do I know, Andrew?
Oh well! Oh, you've burst the bubble there, Chris. It was all looking good before that.
I'm just looking at what Regis Labrise had to say as well, and I think these are actually really important quotes from him. He said, first of all, it's a massive statement about the attractiveness of the club. If a player of that dimension says yes to our project, it means something. I have to congratulate the people behind the scenes for completing this move. It makes a big noise, and that is something we are looking forward to do this season. And this was really important, I thought. He said, for the squad, it's really important. We started our recruitment with talented young players, but the second layer is to balance the squad with more experience. So there's the plan. With what he has achieved in the game, Granit is really good for that.
Yeah. Did you find that really interesting in terms of what Keith Downey said with his conversations with Regis Labrie? Because he got the feeling that actually he was excited by these young signings, but I think Regis Labrie, from his point of view, wanted that next phase. He wanted that experience in, and I don't think he was particularly kind of happy that. I think he expected it to have those experienced players kind of sooner in pre-season. So I think he was like, because I think the words coming out of him from what Keith Downey said was, this isn't going to be what it's like at the start of the season. This isn't going to we're not going to look like this. And I think by that he was talking about a midfield that probably had an average age of about 21, 22 or something like that. And I don't think he thought that that's how we were going to start the season. And you're right. I think this is the start of it. And this is what Regis Labrie wanted. I think he knows that we need the mix, and he needs this second part of the transfer window to go right.
Yeah, this second part does need to go right. Just something going back to some earlier quotes Gav read out that ties in with what you're saying there about when you're signing experience, you're not just signing a player, you're signing a family. I know that sounds really cheesy, but if you're wanting to buy one or two established players, they're more likely to have kids, a wife, a home to think about. So it does take a little bit longer to make some of these deals happen, because they've got to all be happy with the area they're potentially moving to. They don't just want to up sticks and leave Germany or wherever it is. So it was really important, I think, earlier on, was it perhaps the Speakman quotes where they said, we welcome Granit and his family, on that posh jet. I think his dad was flying with him, so that suggests that they're quite close. And again, all of these things are important and add up to this package. If we are wanting to sign one or two more experienced players, that might take a couple of weeks longer to make those deals. And we just have to be patient, because we want people to feel like this is the right choice. We want Mrs. Xhaka or whoever to be on board with this. And again, it appears to me as if the club are considering that when they're when they're doing things. And again, it all forms this idea that there's a plan here and we're not just scattergun, picking up the phone saying, do you want to come here? No. Oh, well, how does 20 grand extra sound?
Yeah.
We're trying to do it right.
And it's very interesting as well in terms of the central defenders that I was surprised at the start of the window that every central defender we were linked with was late 20s, that sort of range. And actually now coming into this part of the window, it's starting to make more sense that those players have been linked with us rather than a 20-year-old up and coming central defender. Because I think they probably still see, Ballard's and he's coming into his prime. Sealt's the young one, I suppose, who we're bringing on. Or Luke 09 is just Luke 09, but I think bringing that real experienced defender who's been there and done it, I think is the plan.
You can afford for somebody like Talby to take his time and learn his game. But yeah, in central defence, do you need somebody with a bit more know-how?
Yeah, it's much easier in the attacking positions, isn't it, to bring those young players in?
Yeah. Well, we'll move on a bit from Xhaka, I think, because there are other bits to talk about, and I'm sure he'll come back up this week because, I don't think that captaincy thing is going away, nor is the speculation around Dan Neil and stuff. So I imagine we'll talk a little bit more about that as the week goes on. Moving on slightly, we are apparently about to sign a goalkeeper too, and they call him Robin Roefs. I think that's how you say it. Roefs or Roofs? I think it's Roofs, actually. But me Dutch isn't me best, as you know. So, David Ornstein, he brought this story early on Wednesday morning. He said, Sunderland have reached an agreement with NEC Nijmegen to sign Robin Roefs as their new number one goalkeeper. Deal for the 22-year-old Netherlands U21 international is €10.5 million plus €3 million in add-ons, and with a sell-on for his club. The medical is today before joining Sunderland on a 5-year contract. So that is basically done. Strange, we know we're talking about the biggest signing we've possibly ever made in Granit Xhaka. Meanwhile, we're going and spending, another 8-figure sum on a goalkeeper who's apparently coming in as number one. And this has been a big conversation, hasn't it, Andrew? Because we've been talking about, will Anthony Patterson be the number one in the Premier League? Will the club go out and sign somebody to replace him? Or are they going to go out and get someone like a Sam Johnson, who we've been linked to, who would be more of a competition for his place? But again, another massive signing. Again, I don't know the guy. I haven't seen him play other than the obligatory YouTube compilations and things like that. And of course, everybody looks world class in them compilations, don't they? So we can't take them too seriously. But still, it's a big commitment from the football club to go and spend that much on a goalkeeper. 5-year deal. Ornstein's calling him the new number one. I mean, Patterson's barely played in pre-season. Did he get some minutes against Shields? I can't remember if he's even played. But he's expected to be missing for the start of the season. And Chris was talking about this before, we are very, very close to that Premier League first game. Technically, we've got 2 games left because I think you kind of have to discount the one in Germany. That's probably going to be a second string, given it's the day before the final game of pre-season. So really, we've got 2 games, both at the Stadium of Light. I'm sure the club are under no illusions how important it is to have players in place ready for the new season starting. We don't want to be chucking these lads in having never played with their teammates before. So I think we're going to really see some of these deals motoring along. And the big ones are getting that defender in, getting the goalkeeper in, aren't they? So, yeah, I'm glad to see this one coming along because it feels like a while really since we've talked properly about goalkeepers. That Marcin Bulka link must have been a month ago now, maybe more. But yeah, I'm sure you're like me. You don't know too much about the guy, but it's still a big commitment and a big sign, isn't it, when we're spending that much?
It is, yeah. And you're right. If you'd asked me an hour or so ago, I wouldn't have known anything about this lad. I've done a little bit of reading on him since, and I can see why the club have identified him. I wouldn't be surprised now if we got some concrete news on Patterson, because you're right. Unless I've missed it, he hasn't played in pre-season since South Shields. But I don't think I've seen anywhere any sort of mention of him being injured. I wonder if now that we're about to get another goalkeeper in, we might find out a little bit more about that. But yeah, the profile of this keeper is slightly different to Marcin Bulka and the lad from Chelsea in that he's not quite as old and he's not played quite as many games. is kind of his CV is a bit similar to Patterson's in a way, in that he's a bit of a younger keeper, but has established himself as a number one. I wonder if that can spur Patterson on, because if you sign a goalkeeper for 30 odd million, does Patterson just think, well, I've got no chance here, I'm not going to replace him? If you sign a keeper for slightly less, does that give Patterson the thought, oh well, if I push myself, I can still meet this lad's standards? But yeah, he does look decent on paper. I think he did well in that European under-21s championship that's just gone. There's a tweet going around, isn't there, that there's only 4 keepers in the top 6 European leagues that actually prevented more goals than him. So he's obviously got something about him. I wonder as well, the fact that he played for a slightly smaller club in the Netherlands, does that mean he is going to fit into a newly promoted side well? Perhaps he's been playing in teams which haven't had loads of the ball. They've been under pressure. I think they did all right, and I think they finished in the top half of the league, but that was maybe overachieving from what I gather. So he's not going to come here and panic about the fact that there's going to be games where he's under pressure. I wonder if the fact that he's slightly cheaper than previous links might mean we now have more money to spend elsewhere. And I think I don't know if interesting is the right word, but you had Ramsdale, who we were linked with a few weeks ago. That was another well-established name who was potentially coming to Sunderland. And Gav, at the time you and I spoke about him, and we weren't sure if he was the right
I think
person.
I've been kind.
Yeah. I'm trying to be careful because I'm aware that he might be signing for our near neighbours, and if he does well for them, this will get thrown back in my face. But whereas Ramsdale was one that I was a little bit unsure about and had reservations of, this kid, if he's as good as his potential and his stats say, I could see him being really good for us. Is he quite a tall lad as well?
Yeah, he's a big boy. Yeah. And I'm just looking as well. Scouted the football magazine, which specifically looks at young players. They named him in the team of the tournament for you mentioned them before, the under-21 Euros. He was in that team along with another player we've been linked with, which is Charlie Cresswell. So somebody who's clearly, very, very well thought of, just had a really good tournament, as you mentioned. And you mentioned about some of the tweets going around about him. It was actually Dougie Critchley, who, of course, was on the pod a few weeks ago. He put one out, said, 24-25 is his first season as the number one at his current club. They finished 8th with the 7th best defensive record. His save percentage of 73% was ranked 4th in Eredivisie, and only 2 goalkeepers kept more than his 10 clean sheets, which when given he's not playing for one of the big boys, that's really impressive. He had a prevented XG of 9.7, the best record in the Eredivisie. For context, in Europe's top 5 leagues, which the Eredivisie is not included in, this would have had him as 6th out of 212 goalkeepers that featured last season. So, yeah. And his real unique selling point appears to be his cross-claiming. He claimed 52 last season, a figure topped by 4 goalkeepers in Europe's top 5 leagues. Joan Garcia, Zion Suzuki, Emi Martinez and David Raya. He claimed 11.2 of crosses into his area. Only 6 goalkeepers could better that in Europe's top 5 leagues. So, yeah, stats don't give you the full picture of everything, Chris, but you can kind of see why this is happening. I mean, we sit here and go, never heard of him, but he looks all right on paper. I can guarantee you Sunderland have heard of him. We've been scouting him extensively and we'll have been looking at him very, very closely. And there were reports about the club having scouts at all the games at that European Championships over the summer. So we'll have looked at him playing for the Netherlands as well. So, these are all things that get me excited without knowing too much about him. I don't know about you. You've got a wry smirk on your face there, because I know your thoughts on team of the seasons that appear on Twitter and stuff.
Well, I was just thinking it's almost back in the day when you used to do your scouting on Football Manager and stuff. It's like, right, well, who's team of the tournament for the under-21s, right? I'll have a bit of him and I'll stick him on my shortlist. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I talked about the likes of Talby earlier and Siddiqui as well, and you do wonder how much this lad comes into that bracket, because it's almost, and again, I hate to say it, but it's the type of thing Brighton, the likes of Brighton, would look at, where these players have a breakout season. That they're an unknown people. There's probably the names getting banded around as a talented young player coming through, and then suddenly they have that one season, and then the big clubs wait for them to have that next move, the intermediate move, and it's clubs like us that give them that intermediate move. And then if we maybe get him for 10, and he has 2 brilliant seasons in the Premier League, for example, then he's on the market for 30, 40 million in 2 years' time. That's the way it works.
Yeah. And
it's taken that chance on players, because he's played, in his whole career, he's played 42 games for his club. And we're talking about buying him for more than 10 million quid, which, if you put it in that way, but it's that chance. It's going, right, we've had that. He's talented. He's had one breakout season. So it's taken a punt to a certain extent, because you've only got so much data to work with. But by the way, talking about his data looks unbelievable. You mentioned in some of these where he is in rankings and stuff like that. But when you actually look at his data and compare it out, okay, it's not apples for apples in terms of Patterson being in the Championship and probably not having as much to do, saves per game. So it's the data skewed a bit. But this lad went to a side who finished 8th, and I think they're in the European playoffs to qualify for a European competition, finishing 8th in their division, something like that. And again, looking that he apparently appeared high up on Lille's list. They were in for him as well. And you think 22-year-old, 42 games, it's really not a lot. By 22-year-old, I mean, you talk about Pickford going out and having all those loan signings and playing some games. I mean, how many games would you expect a 22-year-old to play? A goalkeeper. I suppose goalkeeper is more difficult to get in the side, but it's not a lot of games. So we're clearly thinking he's got it. He's got that potential. And coming in as a number one, I think it's. And again, I'll use the same argument with Patterson as I did with Dan Neil. Although the difference is, I mean, and it's incredible when you think about it. Andrew, you mentioned about Patterson being young, and he is. But he is in our mind because he's come through out of the ranks. But he's 25. Like he's now coming into what should be his prime. Well, maybe a few years' time, but he's coming towards the prime of his career in terms of a goalkeeper. And he's contracted for the next 3 years, Anthony Patterson. So I think again, and it's the club. It's the way the club are working. There's no sentiment. Look, we'll look after these players. We're not going to do them down. We're not going to shaft them in any way. They're getting paid a lot of good money but we're moving up to the Premier League and we're going to buy in good players. Now, it's up to you whether you want to challenge for those positions and fight for your place in the team, or whether you move on. Now, if this is the beauty of the thing, we signed this lad for, let's say, I think it might work out like something like 13 million, 14 million in terms with add-ons. Now, if Patterson just says, well, I'm not in the side, I want first team football, he's highly rated, young for an English goalkeeper, 25. A club will come in and pay 15, maybe 20 million for him. And again, that's your money back that you can invest in another goalkeeper. And that's how it works. But they're protecting the club. So Patterson, they know they can't hang their hat on one goalkeeper in the Premier League. You fill your squad with quality so you can say, well, that's not quite working, but we've got this other player who can come in. And again, you even look at the Ronaldo one as well. Dennis Serkin being fantastic for us, but coming into the last year of his contract, the club don't hang around until Dennis Serkin decides at the last minute he wants to leave, and then we're stuck for a left back. Ronaldo comes in and we're sorted. And then it's up to Dennis Serkin to fight him out, sign a new contract or leave. So it's kind of at every turn this summer, you can see them protecting the club. There's no kind of leaving it up to players to end up putting us in a really bad position and then us blame players. It's because it's the players' prerogative to decide whether they want to stay and go. And people should remember that they've got no obligation to stay with Sunderland. And we've got no obligation to wait for them to make a decision. We protect ourselves by making our squad as strong as possible. And I mean, again, looking at the, we stuck up. I think we forwarded a highlight reel and some of the saves. I was kind of watching it and mesmerised by some of the saves he's made. They're all brilliant. All those things are made to look brilliant. But look, I think 22-year-old, one of the highly rated goalkeepers in Europe, clubs after him. I'm just glad to be in that market, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes back to this, just to touch on something you said there, comes back to this thing we keep saying, which is there is genuinely no room for sentiment.
No.
And the club, I'm sure that they love Patterson, Neil and Sirkin, those are the names you mentioned there. I'm sure they love them and they want them to stay, but they also know what they're worth in terms of, contract length, wages, etc. And if the players are, let's just use Dan Neil as an example, because we know that his contract is coming up. Dan Neil turns around and says, well, actually, I want this. I think I'm worth this. And the club go, well, for a player of your ability, we think you're worth this because we know we can get a player better than you for this much.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way it works. And unfortunately, if the likes of Neil, Patterson and Sirkin don't have that hunger to fight for their place, and I'm not saying they don't, I'm just saying, if they don't, because we brought in players that can effectively replace them. If that hunger isn't there, then maybe it is best that they go. Maybe it is best that they take the money, take a better deal at an Everton or a Wolves or abroad or something like that. And that's fine. So what Sunderland cannot do is hang around and wait for players to decide what they're going to do.
Yep.
We had the opportunity, and sometimes you don't get a big window of opportunity with certain players. So this goalkeeper, for instance, he's had a busy summer, so he's had a break. He's probably just coming back in for pre-season now at his club. So, this might be the only time to get him because somebody else might come along. I mean, there was a tweet from David Cartledge, who is the editor at ESPN UK, and he said only a few days ago Roefs was linked with Lille to replace Chevalier, which is what you mentioned before, Chris. And he said, so Sunderland have clearly reacted here. And if that's true, then you can kind of understand why we're doing it, right? And it's the same with Ronaldo. He would have been keen to get that next move sorted. And despite the fact he hasn't played yet in pre-season, Sunderland have gone, he's quality. If we can get him here, let's do it. Free transfer. Get in there before somebody else, one of the Saudi clubs maybe, or, another La Liga team.
Yeah.
You've got to take these opportunities when they arise. If we hang around, and we're so used to Sunderland doing this, aren't we? Sunderland pissing around and missing out on good players.
Yeah.
It feels like finally we're going, nah, we're not going to be like that anymore. Let's just get the deals done that we need to get done.
Yeah, but what I don't think it is, though, in a lot of ways, I think it's we are reacting, but our window isn't reactionary. What it shows is it's shown months and months and months of planning that we've got these lists of players that we've prioritized, and it's in order of probably, can we get the deal over the line? There's probably goalkeepers maybe above them in terms of the ones we want, but it's like we're not going to be able to get that deal done because of circumstances, and they're not going to affect in the market. Sometimes you wait for one domino to fall and two of your targets become available. So then it's that decision. Do you wait for your let's say top three targets, just to throw a number out, and your fourth target now becomes available because of the circumstances? You then react by saying, look, one of our targets has become available, is now on the market because of this move. We need to go for him now, or we risk losing out on your top five, your top five targets. So you've got to react within your planning. So you've got everything down. You know how you're going to, how you need to work, and you wait for these moments and act on it.
Yeah.
You're dead right there about the timing and the different circumstances that lead to a transfer. We don't need to look at Marcin Bulka not coming here and necessarily think that this lad is now a second choice.
No.
It might have been a simple case of, at that point, Bulka was available and this kid was playing in the European under-21s and we couldn't have made an approach.
Yeah.
Gav mentioned there, he might only just be coming back for pre-season. So again, things don't just run in a linear fashion. There's all these different things to consider. One thing I do want to say to you though, Chris, will you give me a few tips about Football Manager? because you seem to be a lot more clued up than me these days.
The thing is that I keep saying Football Manager, but I'm still old school. I've got Championship Manager 01 or 2 installed on my laptop, so I haven't got anything. As if I've got time to play the new ones. Bloody hell! I think I'll be on for about 5 years in pre-season. I think.
Chris has still got Tonton Zola Mukoko and Gary Fletcher and
Cherno Samba.
Cherno Samba and that in his team, man.
Brilliant, man.
He's light years behind.
Don't get me started on that. Multiple European Cup winners of Sunderland.
I'd genuinely love to talk about that. but just going back to the keeper, the stat Gav read out about crosses interested me, because we did sometimes feel last season we lacked a bit of height. One of the defenders we're apparently linked with and whose name keeps coming up is the John Lucchini, I believe. Now,
from Bologna.
Yes, yeah. I seem to think I've read some stats that suggest his aerial ability is one of his slightly weaker areas. I'm not criticising the lad. I'm not having a go, but his strengths seem to be in other aspects of defending. So again, are we looking at things in such a wide lens that, we want this type of defender? Well, okay, we'll go for this type of defender, but that means our goalkeeper has to be able to do this to make up for that. I don't just think we have a blank piece of paper that we write a few names on. Oh, I've heard of him. He's canny. Can we go for him? It all seems matched up.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, just in terms of planning as well, it's all well and good us talking about, transfers, but the other, for Christian Spinkman to look at the club as a whole, they've clearly created a pathway for Matty Young. Now, where does it, because he's so highly rated at the club and he's got a pathway, and you wouldn't be surprised if the thinking is we bring this 22-year-old in, brilliant, really talented and all this, and they fight it out for the next year or two while Matty Young, because 18-year-old, he's got a good couple of years to go out on loan and learn his trade. And, let's say 2 or 3 times, potentially, that Patterson might move on. Let's say, for example, he might move on because he's not happy with how much he's getting in the first team. And this lad goes great guns in the next 2 years. We sell him for 30 million. Matty Young, 21, 22-year-old, is ready to take the number 1 position. And this is the linear thinking that you've got to think, where you leave yourself options, whether it's within the club or whether you think, right, well, we'll sell him for 30, buy another 22-year-old for 15. It's that kind of thinking 3 steps ahead. It's that game of chess, isn't it?
This is how you win titles and European Cups on a Championship Manager. This is... that's the way to do it.
I'm glad you put on Championship Manager at the end of that, by the way.
The
way we're going.
I hadn't picked up that he'd only played 40 or so senior games. That wasn't something I'd noticed. But I don't think that needs to be too big a concern, purely for the fact that you've mentioned there, lads, that Lille were pretty interested in him. So perhaps there's something in his makeup that's shown that he's quite a mature head on young shoulders. And
it's a massive financial commitment for it. Obviously, we're buying potential, which is what we've said with a lot of these signings. He's had such a good first year. I mean, them stats are right up there with the top goalkeepers in Europe in his first year.
Yeah,
and I often say this about just players in general. Like, I look at Arsenal spending 75 million on Victor Gyökeres, and I'm like, I watched him play against Sunderland 3-4 years ago. And he was mint then. Why did nobody see it then? Or like Ivan Toney at Brentford. Remember watching him and thinking, why has nobody spent money on him like before he went to Brentford? So that what you've got to do sometimes is you've got to see these players and their trajectory before the top clubs do, and get them while they're still, not cheap. Yeah. Cheap's not the word, because he's not coming in cheap. But if he's potentially going to be a 60, 70 million goalkeeper, which he could be, if he at Sunderland has 2 good years at Sunderland, becomes the Netherlands number 1, and he's still only very young, everybody's going to be looking at him. The top clubs are going to be going, we want him. So, you're almost looking at these players and trying to get in there before they've become on the radar of the big boys. or maybe before other clubs who probably would like to sign him would push the boat out as much as we would and go, actually, I don't know at the minute, about 14 million on a keeper because we need to sign a left back, we need to sign a centre half, and he's only young. I'm not too sure. Maybe in a couple of years, we've got to be in the market where we do what Brighton and other clubs do and go, we'll buy him, we'll give him 30 games in the Premier League.
The whole club has ran like that in the last couple of seasons. I don't want to use the word gamble because it's not a gamble as such, but yeah, there is definitely a feeling of we are the club to be the next step for these youngsters.
But I think Alex Ferguson said once though that it doesn't matter who you sign, every single transfer is a gamble. You're talking about how the lads settle in the area. Xhaka might come across and absolutely love it, but his missus and his family might hate the area and he needs to leave. You just never know what's going to happen.
What you're saying, Chris?
Well,
what you're saying, Chris. I mean, it's beautiful hot weather out there today. They're going to love it.
Well, that's it. Take them down to Minchella's and get them some fish and chips and all that, and they'll be happy as Larry. But the other thing that is in the deal with this, and I touched on it a little bit with Bellingham, and I think I've again kind of said this before, but Lefebvre, you talk about the older lads, Ronaldo, 2-year contract, Xhaka is apparently a 3-year contract. Lefebvre's 4 years, and then you've got Talbi, Diarra, Siddiqui, Adingra, 5-year contract, and you've potentially got this Roef on a 5-year contract, 22-year-old. Now, the thing is, those players, their agents might be saying, "Do you really want to sign on for that long? Do you want to commit for 5 years?" But they can now look at what we did with Bellingham, and the club can go, look at where we can get you, and it's in our best interests and your best interests if you play fantastically well for us and you move on for double the money. I said, you'll make more money out of it. You'll get that bigger move. Sunderland have done well out of it, so everybody's happy, and we're not going to stand in your way. And we've proved that through moving Joe Bellingham on and him being happy and the relationship between club and player being fantastic and us helping him out. Now players look at that and think, actually, I don't mind signing on the dotted line because I trust these people. And that's a massive part in football.
Yeah, definitely. There is trust. And like you say, we're not sentimental around players, but we do seem to treat them right. And if we say something like, come here, and then the time is right to move on, we'll do it. So we are getting a good reputation with regards to that. Something else about young players, I don't think they count towards those. You have to register your squad. I think the first week after the transfer deadline. So there's going to be a lot of players in Sunderland's squad, because they're underage, don't fill up the quotas. I wouldn't be surprised if we do still end up getting somebody like Sam Johnson. Maybe. I know Moore's played a few games in pre-season, but this particular deal doesn't necessarily rule us out getting a third-choice keeper in who's got a few Premier League games under their belt. They're the one that takes...
It's true to say, Andrew, that if Pato goes, you're going to need to replace him still. So you could be right, yeah.
Yeah, one of them takes the spot as in that squad quota that I'm talking about. They take the spot as the not overage player, but is the established player. And a lot of these lads, like Chris Rigg, for example, I know I've mentioned him earlier, I don't think he will count towards those limits in the squad, and again, it gives us options, it gives us a bit of flexibility and time to allow younger players to bed in and find their feet.
Yeah, and actually, just quickly, the same principle applies with Chris Rigg, actually, because even though his potential is off the scale, but he's got 2 years left on his contract. So actually, you wouldn't be surprised if the club now are protecting themselves against Chris Rigg leaving because it might come to the end of next season, I think, where we're actually thinking, Chris Rigg's only got 1 year left now. So let's see how he progresses in the next year in the Premier League. Like I said, I expect him to play 15, 20 games this season. But is he going to be happy with that? Are his performances going to be that good? And it's almost bringing players in now to say, well, they're going to be part of our team for the next couple of years. And that means if Chris Rigg, we're not devastated and in a hole if he leaves for 20-25 million going into the last year of his contract. We've made some money out of a player we didn't pay anything for, but we're already building the squad to protect ourselves against it.
Yeah,
it's forward planning. We're not used to Sunderland thinking like this and thinking ahead, and you can see it. And in the past, we've seen us fall into a hole where, I mean, the whole Josh Madger leaving and Will Grigg and all that. It's like panic stations when somebody leaves, and you can see us protecting the club against it. And it's just
you're dead right. But I now do have a fear that Sunderland being Sunderland, you've got Christian Speakman listening to this podcast thinking, hey, bloody hell, we've just completely fluked upon this squad. And these three lads who got nothing to do with the club they've got better ideas than me.
We're giving them clearly giving them far more credit.
We might get a phone call from the club in the next few hours. Can you come in and give us a bit of advice, please?
Can you stop bigging us up?
Yeah. We've went on a while, yeah, but there is one more thing I want to talk about, and that was the tweet by Julien Laurens, who is somebody I'm sure people listening might be aware of. He's frequently on TNT Sports, 5 Live, Totally Football Show, ESPN. Chris is shaking his head, he doesn't have a clue. He's got 238.5 thousand followers on Twitter, Chris. I don't know if that means anything to you. Probably
Come
not.
on, Chris. I mean, he's been on the BBC and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Followers on what?
I know him from the Totally Football Show. He's been doing that for years. But Julien Laurens, he tweeted on Tuesday about Sunderland making moves for Amine Adli, who plays for Bayer Leverkusen, a 25-year-old Moroccan winger who also used to play for Toulouse in Ligue 1, a France youth international, somebody who is very well known, across Europe, and it was part of that team in the Bundesliga that went unbeaten all season and won the league under Xabi Alonso alongside Granit Xhaka. So interesting to see him linked with us. And Julien Laurens said that Sunderland are in for Amine Adli now and competing with Wolves. Wolves' offer for the Bayer Leverkusen forward. Bayer are not against letting him go, and his priority is to come to England. Sunderland will finalise the Xhaka deal first and then move for his former teammate. And Amine Adli is somebody who I think even I don't know who it was, but I did read a sort of a quote from somebody high up at the club at Bayer who said that they wouldn't be adverse to letting him leave because he wants to be the main man in a team rather than perhaps a player who is in and out of the side. And look, we're talking about the fee mentioned there was 30 million euros is what I read earlier. And that came from Bild because Bild had said that's what Wolves have been quoted. He's a left-footed winger, can play on both sides. Obviously, we know we're in the market for that type of player because the Loriente deal never got over the line last week for whatever reason that was. But another big name in Europe being linked with Sunderland, and yeah, at time of recording, that's the most concrete concrete link we've seen. But again, Andrew, a player who's come from potentially coming in from a team of playing the Champions League, a team of winning trophies. Not someone who's, coming in from a relegated side or he's kicked up a fuss somewhere and has been told he needs to go because he's a nightmare and all this. 25-year-old, he's a little bit older, so that little bit more experienced. He's played hundreds of top-level football games. In fact, he's played 215. And in the last 4 seasons in the Bundesliga, he's played around 100 games. And then obviously a lot of games in Europe as well and in cups and things. So, again, I can't claim to be an expert on this guy, but we know we're in for a player like that. He's, when we were talking about Talbi and Adingra before, he's, I think it's been alluded to by Lebris in recent days, hasn't it? That Talbi is effectively one for the future. We're not expecting him to go and play 38 games, which then makes you see this and think, well, this guy's, if he's coming to Sunderland, he's coming to play every week. And I just get excited by that. I've got to say, when I seen he was a Moroccan international, I was like, another potential loss for the African Cup of Nations over the winter, but still, exciting again. I feel like we're repeating ourselves, but I didn't imagine we'd be signing players of this caliber. I just didn't. I was expecting them all to be like, and I thought we'd be ambitious, but this is 30 million euros for a player who's won the Bundesliga last season. Yeah. It's exciting.
It is, and from the information that you're reading out there, Gav, he would be ready-made. He would be one that you would expect to be in the starting 11 more times than not. I think the fact that he's at Bayer Leverkusen complicates matters, just purely because I get the impression Ten Hag's not too pleased with us at the moment. You know, we might find we have to pay a little bit more if that's a deal that happens. The AFCON side of things doesn't worry me too much, because I think when you sign a player, there's an understanding that at some point in the season they're going to be missing games, whether it's suspension or injury or what have you. And again, the club haven't just forgotten the fact the AFCON's on. They must have looked at it, and it goes back to that thing about it's not a risk, but I'll use the term a calculated risk just because I can't think of the exact term for the time being. They've looked at the fact that the AFCON's on, and perhaps seen now actually as a good time to go for players who are potentially playing there. Maybe other clubs have backed away, and we've thought, well, we can afford to do without for a few weeks, because in the longer term, we've got a player that fits what we want to do. So yeah, again, like yourself, Gav, I'm not going to claim to be some sort of expert or as if I've watched his last 50-odd appearances. You can only go off the information that's available, and it would make a lot of sense if that is a player that we're seriously interested in.
Yeah, is that one that gets your juices flowing, Chris? I know, like, we keep saying we don't ever claim to be experts on Bundesliga football, for instance. I knew Granit Xhaka was because he played in the Premier League. Not so sure about this lad, although, you can't kind of argue with his record. He's been a part of a really successful Bayer Leverkusen team who have been playing at the top of European football for the last couple of years. So that tells you a lot about him, and he's a good age, and he's somebody who's played in France. I'm sure if we are in for him, the fact we've just signed his captain from his club might have something to do with attracting him to Sunderland, and the fact we've got players. We've just signed obviously Chemsen Talbi, who's a Moroccan player, probably going to go on to play for Morocco this season. So we're building a squad here, which makes it attractive to sign these players from other leagues as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, just I keep using the word exciting. It is.
Yeah, well, look, Bayer Leverkusen, just on that, Andrew, you made that point, but about Ten Hag not being happy with us. I think, to be honest, it's not really Sunderland he'll not be happy with. I think it's his own club he won't be very happy with. And I think that in terms of transfer negotiations, I don't think it's got anything to do with him, with the way clubs work now. So I actually think that it might give us a leg up, because with the Xhaka deal, we said, how much do you want? They gave us a total. We said yes. And if we come saying, they know we're, we don't mess people around. We pay what people think they're worth and all that. So potentially, if we are talking to them, potentially that might go in our favour. Now, in terms of the player, we mentioned Loriente, the winger. I mean, exactly the same profile. I mean, virtually kind of carbon copy. I think even to the point of the goals. I mean, I'm not saying I've seen them I've seen them extensively, and I know they've got exactly the same tricks and flicks, but wide left and roughly about 1 in 6 in terms of goals. So they're not prolific. They're not going to get you lots and lots of goals. I think Llorente probably got a few more than Adli, but yeah, still exciting. And you're talking about squad building. So on the right at the minute, we'll have Dinger and Roberts fighting it out. We've got all those players in the central midfield fighting it out. We're talking about who's going to miss out there. You've mentioned, Gav, on that side, Talbi. I mean, Mundell obviously had that injury, so see what progresses there. And he was potentially gonna make a move as well before he got injured. There was all that speculation, so we'll see what happens with Mundell. But at the moment, you've got Talbi on that side, and we clearly want one more on that left hand side. We want 2 players to fight it out. Ronaldo and Sirkin at left back. We need to strengthen the centre midfield. Wouldn't be surprised if we brought in a right back, and obviously we're looking at someone to fight it out with Patterson. So you can see that we're doubling up in all the positions, and I think this is seems to make sense in terms of that left-sided player. We've already been in for one, and it was really interesting. Keith Downey kind of hinted at it and stopped himself a little bit. He was kind of like, kind of something happened in that. But the impressive thing from a Sunderland point of view was that we smelled something wasn't quite right somewhere, and instead of messing about, we just went, nope, no thanks, all bets are off. Sorry, we're pulling out of this, and we'll move on to our next target. And the timing's right, because that fell through, was that last week, Loriente, I think. So the timing's right, where potentially we can like move on, and this is potentially the next target. We're looking at Bayer Leverkusen, and I think the only thing, Andrew, in those negotiations that might go against us is that Bayer Leverkusen are having a shocking summer. So it might actually take them to bring someone in to let us start talking to them in that sense, because they're hemorrhaging players. So that might go against us. But the sounds are, I mean, he played, I think it was only 20 league games he played last season. So it's not like he's kind of ever present playing, 40 games or however many. I think Xhaka played. I think he's played 99 games in the last 2 seasons. And I think, he's played more in the last 2 seasons than I think this lad has in the last 4 for Bayer Leverkusen. So he's not kind of a starter in every league game. But yeah, look, and again, it's building that profile. So it's pace, it's kind of attacking players, it's, that it's going at players, it's being positive, and that's the profile we're trying to sign on the wings as well. So yeah, you wouldn't be surprised. It's the type of profile we're looking for on that wing, isn't it?
We seem to like players who can cut inside and have a shot. That means they're potentially capable on both feet, so you can move them around. And I know you said there may be 1 in 5, 1 in 6, but you do want your wingers to chip in with goals. So yeah, and like you say, we've identified a certain type of player.
Last season though, he predominantly played through the middle for Bayer Leverkusen. So he played 18 games as a centre forward / second striker, 4 as an attacking midfielder, and just 5 games off the wing. So 3 as a left winger and 2 as a right winger. So he's obviously very versatile. But you just wonder, don't you? We know we need a centre forward. We seem to like these strikers who can play on the wing, because then we can mix it up. There might be a day where we need him to play through the middle, but there might also be a day where we need him to play off the left and have Isidore through the middle. And we want flexibility up top. We don't want to go out and sign, for all intents and purposes, a Kiefer Moore or somebody like that who just stands up front and you ping the ball off them. We want somebody who can run with the ball, who can, in transitions, is very quick at getting forward. So I'm not expecting us to. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a signing for the forward position through the middle, but somebody who we can move around. I think if let's say we do go and sign this guy, we'd have him, Mayenda, Isidore, and then Abdullahi, all of whom have pace, can play different positions, can play in a 2 if they need to, can play on their own if they need to. It's just about having options, I think. And even if we don't sign this guy and he does go to Wolves, who are apparently in for him, I keep saying this, we'll sign somebody of that stature. We will sign a player who can do what we're clearly trying to identify, a certain type of forward, and we will find one, whether it's him or somebody else. I'm not worried.
It is interesting though. It's modern day football, isn't it? That he played. That I think, and we talked about it a bit before, Gav, actually, and I think Andrew might have talked about it in one of the top 10s, that the striker position is disappearing. Like that point person who gets you 20, 25 goals a season, that's gone. You build that player within the other players. So if you, instead of having 1 or 2 players who score 40 goals a season between them, you have 4 players who might score 10 each across your midfield. Or you might have 2 wingers who chip in with 8 and a striker who chips in with 15. But actually now, a haul of 15 goals is pretty good. Whereas back in the day, if that was your main striker, if your main striker was a 1 in 6, you'd go, oh, bloody hell, he's not very good, is he? you'd be bad.
I was reading while I was on the train over the weekend, I was reading the 4-4-2 season preview.
Oh, because I
might have been in that.
Yeah, I was going to I thought you'd plug that at some point.
Yeah, no. So anybody who doesn't know, there is a big feature, 4-page feature on Sunderland in one of the two magazines you get as part of that bundle. But in the second magazine, there's a full season preview of every team in the Premier League. And I hadn't, mainly because I don't really watch much Premier League football, I've been focused fully on Sunderland and the Championship. I hadn't realised that there are probably only one or two clubs who had a striker who got over 20 goals. Everyone else was sort of 10, 12, 13 maybe as the top scorer. So, you've got to kind of adjust your mentality. When we were last in the Premier League, we had Jermaine Defoe up front, and he was getting you 14, 15 goals a season, even when we got relegated, A lot's changed in that 8 years. The game's completely changed. We don't have, certainly not successful teams don't tend to have an out-and-out centre-forward playing for them. And the ones that are out there, I mean, there are very few these days, but the ones that are out there end up playing for Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Barcelona, Real Madrid. There's not many of them out there. You're talking about Isaac at Newcastle potentially going somewhere. There's only a handful of teams could pay for him because at the end of the day, he's a specialist in what he does because there aren't many out-and-out strikers anymore.
Yeah.
And even call him an out-and-out striker is weird because years ago he probably would have been a winger or something, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Because he can dribble and things. And that's enough about Newcastle anyways. But my point is, we just don't have that type of player out there anymore. And the ones that are good at doing it and are still out there, they come at a premium.
Yeah.
So,
and if you're talking about that one who plays up front on his own. Now, if you talk about partnerships, God, I mean, that's proper old-fashioned now, isn't it?
Yeah, there's none of that anymore. Maybe Mbuemo and Visser at Brentford last season, but they've been broken up.
Yeah.
So, So, Andrew, we've been linked with a move for Marc Guiu, I think it is. I'm not too sure. Again, pronunciations are brilliant, as always, but Marc Guiu or Gu, I'm not too sure. He is a Chelsea striker, 19-year-old, used to play for Barcelona. Has played a little bit for them, but not too much in the Premier League. Mainly played in the Conference League last season for Chelsea. Did play and actually scored for Barcelona when he was even younger. And played a little bit in the Club World Cup over the summer too. So he's a young man, somebody who is clearly very well thought of, or he wouldn't have been playing for Barcelona and wouldn't have been playing for Chelsea. But not someone I particularly know that much about. Still, Keith Downey tweeted saying exclusive Sunderland are in talks with Chelsea to sign Marc Guiu. Again, don't know if I'm getting that right. The 19-year-old striker is available on loan, and Sunderland have made an approach to Chelsea. Fabrizio Romano then backed that up and said Sunderland are among three clubs asking for him on loan, as Chelsea are open to this situation. Chelsea want the full salary paid and no buyback clause, straight loan and then back next season. Talks ongoing. There's been a bunch of other prominent accounts talking about this, but yeah, I mean, again, not someone I can profess to know too much about. But if the big boys are tweeting about it, it's going to be something that's in the offing. But I mean, rather than talk specifically about him, because we don't really, I'm sure you're the same, unless you're an expert in the youth career of him. I'm pretty sure you won't know a great deal about him. But interesting that we're choosing to bring in a striker on loan for one, and interesting he's 19-year-old, and that the possibly isn't the prospect of him signing permanently. This could just be literally a straight loan. Sunderland get the use of this player for a year or so and then send him back. Is that all right by you?
It wouldn't be my first choice, but if the club have identified something in him and think he can do a job for us for now, and again we're having all these discussions about longer term plans. The club might even have half an eye on the following transfer windows anyway. So, yeah, if they think he is a suitable stopgap for a season, and then that gets us to next summer and we can look again and maybe somebody else is then ready to be brought into the club, so be it. As I say, it wouldn't be my first choice, Gav, to be bringing in a loan, but we've said before, haven't we? The club have done enough to earn our trust. We can be confident these deals have been thought out and it's not just been done as a last gasp measure. So yeah, I don't know a lot about him, but he's had a couple of games in La Liga and in the Premier League. I mean, we've currently got no strikers with Premier League experience, so that's a little bit of a bonus already.
So he's automatically our most Premier League ready striker, then.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And I think he got a couple of goals in. Was it? I can't remember if it was the Conference or the Conference League. Chelsea won last year, so he's a young lad wanting to make his way, and having had a couple of appearances for Chelsea, you'd like to think that if he was to come here, you'd like to think he'd be keen to do well for himself as much as anything else. So, yeah, it's an interesting one, and our business just seems to be picking up again all of a sudden. All these names have all started popping up again.
Yeah, I'm not like sort of, don't know what's the word. I'm not. It's not like I'm bouncing off the walls about this one, but I do understand it because I'm a big fan of Mayenda. I'm a big fan of Isidore. I think Mayenda could, and I think the club think he could possibly end up doing very well in the top flight. So they've got to be careful too. We can't just go and sign, somebody who is going to take their place effectively. They're all going to have a part to play. And to be honest, I think you probably need 4 forward players. So, if he can offer something a little bit different to the others, then it's fair enough, isn't it? He's, I know we were talking before about how there's a dying breed in terms of football in that position, in the striker position. But he's more of a line leading striker. He isn't someone that's going to stick out on the wing or play as a number 10. He is sort of an out and out forward. So, perhaps that's why we're just going out and we want someone who's a bit of a different option. Yeah. And that's fine. You're going to need options in the Premier League. There's going to be all different types of opponent, games, situations. We know Regis Lebris loves to be prepared for everything, and he likes to have the weapons at his disposal to be able to be able to manage games throughout games. He likes to get the 70th, 80th minute. And this kid, because he's at the minute kind of just warming the bench for Chelsea, I'm sure he'd be very happy to come into Sunderland and try and force his way in here. And the carrot dangling for him, if he comes to Sunderland, is that if he does well here, he goes back to Chelsea and perhaps plays a bigger part there. And, he's more likely to get a chance of really proving himself initially, certainly this season coming at Sunderland than he would be, with Chelsea. Because as we know, Chelsea have just went out and bought 2 strikers, Liam Delap and João Pedro. So, they've spent a lot of money in that position. That's going to limit his opportunities. And, as far as they're concerned, if he's getting some minutes in the Premier League somewhere else, then it's a win all round, really. So, and if it doesn't work out, he's on loan. We've got other players. I can't see a lot of downside to this.
Yeah, in that sense, you're right. It is low risk. If it doesn't work out, we're not then having to work out what to do with him next season. I think you're right from Chelsea's point of view. Them letting him go out on loan doesn't necessarily think they've written him off. As you say, they've spent big money on more established strikers. So if they think, and do you know what? I'm going to throw a third pronunciation into the mix here. So between us, Gav, we might have it. I don't know if it's going to be Guiu.
That's really bad, right? I listened to a video of him telling people how to pronounce his name, and I've already forgot how he said it. So it's one of them, really. I should know. Remember, I won't be the only one. I can't be the only person looking at that name and going, "How the hell do you?"
Well, Mark, it'll be Mark for the time being. But yeah, Chelsea might have, might be keen on him and think he's got a future there. But because there's other players higher up in the pecking order, they think the time's right for him to move out. As you say, for us, we maybe don't want to block the path of some players who are already on our books, so this kind of is nice, might be viewed as a halfway house where it suits everybody for now. It certainly doesn't mean that's it in terms of strikers. We might have other links. You never know. And it might just be one that he's going to come along to complement the other options. But yeah, you're right in that Regis Lebris is going to need variety. I've said a few times to you, you can name plenty of options on the bench. So yeah, you're going to see a few different names on the bench who can maybe be brought in depending on how the game's going. I don't think there's a stigma anymore about being named as a substitute. You know, players don't see that as them not being deemed not good enough. You've got this term, haven't you, about how players are now finishers. You know, even in the Euro women's final, Chloe Kelly, absolutely stunning player, starts the game on the bench because they've decided that's the best way to utilise her skills. So, yeah, he might come along and be an ever-present. He might not, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad signing. It gives us a bit of variety, and yeah, like you said, I can see what the club are thinking about with this one.
Yeah, let's wait and see how that one goes. Yeah. Anyways, that's we've chatted for an awful long time, and I've really enjoyed it. Actually, you know, we've got our teeth right into these particular transfers. Hopefully, the listeners have too, and I'm sure, you know, if the Adli and Roefs deals advance, we'll do another pod through the week talking about how that's all transpired and stuff. But
probably in an hour's time.
Feeling that, yeah, you do get the feeling though that because we are basically down to the last 2 games of pre-season in terms of the first 11 for that first game against West Ham, they're really pulling out all the stops now to get deals done and get this team shaped up in the way they want it to be ready for West Ham.
Yeah.
So,
but would you be surprised, looking at how we've worked in the last couple of seasons, is that actually we might, in the back pocket, late in the window, we might have a few people on a short list ready maybe for a season-long loan?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, Chris, we've barely talked about getting rid of players.
Yeah.
We've got so many players to get rid of. They're clearly very focused. The club's resources are focused on bringing in that sort of core of who we need ready for the West Ham game. We're going to have an entire month of August to sort out players leaving. You know, there's going to be a lot of that going on. We've got so many players to move on. And on top of that, we've got players we need to, you know, just the odd ones that come up at the end of windows, loans and things. And, you know, we might end up selling 1 or 2 of these players we consider as part of the first team, and then they've got to be replaced. But at the minute, it's just all about getting basically that first 16, 18 together for West Ham, isn't it?
That's a lot of podcasts, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we'll be here doing it, I'm sure. We'll be here doing it. So thank you very much, listeners, for sticking it out for this long. We've done twice as long as I thought we would, but they are big stories to talk about, so I'm not surprised. Thanks, Andrew. Been great, mate. Much appreciated.
I loved it. Cheers.
Yeah, and cheers, Chris. And I'm just glad our voices held out, mate.
Yeah, cheers, mate. I love a quick half-hour pod.
Yeah, I did actually say, should we record a half-hour podcast today? And it's turned into nearly an hour and a half.
Gav's quick half hours.
Yeah, they never work out as I think. Thank you, as I said, listeners. We will be back with more pods this week. Plenty coming. Obviously, we've got the game at the weekend, so we build up to that. If there's any experts out there that we want to speak to get more of a lowdown on these players, I'm sure we will. And of course, you will be listening to our top 10s and on this week pods that come up as a regular through the week. So get subscribed if you're new to us. Thank you very much for listening. And as I said, we'll be back with another one tomorrow. We'll see you later.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.